Thank you so much. On behalf of India Water Partnership, Ministry of Jal Shakti, India Water Week Secretariat, I am very privileged to welcome our chair, panelists, and distinguished participants in the panel discussion on role of civil society in water management during the 7th India Water Week. It is indeed a matter of satisfaction that India Water Week has considered the role of civil society in efficient water management and invited civil society, India Water Partnership, to facilitate this panel discussion. And this panel discussion is not possible without the support of the network partners of India Water Partnership. And I'm very glad that we have very distinguished panelists today with us from our network. You know that civil society is an important stakeholder of the water management regime in India. And there are many examples, and you must have seen during past 3 days and during the inaugural session that civil society is demonstrating a very influential role to bring reforms to policies and institutions and improving decision making and implementation of the projects. At the same time, civil society organizations are also very effective agencies who can help in building capacity of people through awareness, training, knowledge, development, and skill enhancement, and playing an important role in sustainable water management. Civil society organizations are also leading advocacy campaigns with other stakeholders, for example, Ministry of Jal Shakti, respective state governments, funding agencies, community and citizen groups to bring improvement in water governance. If we talk about the Global Water Partnership, IWRM framework, it considers community and civil society organization as an important actor and driver of change for betterment of water management, because they represent the interest of diverse and sometimes underrepresenting groups of the public and communicate those concerns and preferences to decision makers. And with this background, today we all will be brainstorming on the prevailing water situations in the country and the challenges of management and roles of various stakeholders with a focus on the observed and desired contribution of civil society organizations towards better water management. Now I would like to introduce and invite today's session chair, Mr. A.B. Pandya, on the dais. I think we all know him, and I will request Mr. Pandya to come over the dais and give a big applause of just to brief, Mr. Pandya is a regional council member of GWP South Asia and Secretary General, International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, and former Chairman, Central Water Commission, Government of India. He is a civil engineer by profession and MTech in structural engineering from IIT Delhi. His major area of works include setting up policy initiatives, planning, design, and financing of water resource projects for hydropower and irrigation projects, including the regional planning for optimum water resource utilizations, simulations, and disaster management for flood and dam-related incidents. So thank you, sir, for chairing the session today. Now I would like to invite our next panelist, Mr. V.K. Madhavan. He is the CEO, WaterAid India. Mr. Madhavan is a well-known name in the social and water sector, and he brings with him a rich experience of over 30 years, both from the grassroots as well as the national and international NGOs. His master's in international politics from JNU, and he has commenced work with the Urmul, and since then he has worked with ActionAid and the Hunger Project. Prior to joining WaterAid, he was the managing director of Skills Education Private Limited. He is also a TED Global Fellow and a TED Senior Fellow. We welcome you, sir. Now I would like to invite Dr. Asad Umar. He's a director, WASH, in Health, Aga Khan Foundation. Dr. Umar is a PhD in hydrogeology, and he brings a rich experience of over 20 years of working in the water and sanitation sector. He is currently the director for WASH and Health at Aga Khan Foundation, and his contribution to Jal Jeevan Mission and Swachh Bharat Mission is worth a mention. Currently, he is a member of Rural Water Supply Network, SWA, and jury member of ISC FICCI Sanitation Award. We are very privileged to have with us the Dr. Asad Umar, who is a recipient of International Fellowship on Groundwater Governance in Asia, awarded by IMI. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite my next panelist, Mr. Shehwag Siddiqui. He's a founding member of Indian Environment Law Organization, and he's working on legal and policy interventions with respect to environment. He is a people's lawyer, deeply engaged with the water and river communities in India and neighboring countries in South Asia. He has been instrumental in preparing the model institutional framework for the Bureau of Water Use Efficiency for Ministry of Water Resources. He has also drafted the water policy for the state governments of UP, Nagaland, Meghalaya, among others. Welcome, Mr. Shehwag Siddiqui. Now I would like to invite Dr. Nupur Bahadur. She's a senior fellow and head of the NMCG TERI Center of Excellence on Water Reuse in the Water Resource Division of TERI. Dr. Nupur Bahadur is a PhD in chemistry from IIT Roorkee and is the inventor of TERI's advanced oxidation technology called TEDOX for wastewater treatment and reuse. She is also serving as a vice chairman of the International Water Association India. She is an academician at heart, but with her focus on R&D, and has moved to consultancy, innovation and technology development. She is also the recipient of several technology innovations and development awards. Very recently, she has been awarded the FICCI Water Awards 2022. Welcome, Dr. Nupur Bahadur, for this panel. Now I would like to invite Shri Suresh Babu, Director, River Basins and Water Policy, WWF India. Suresh Babu leads a multidisciplinary program at WWF India on river basin management, ranging from environmental flow and sustainable water management, habitat and biodiversity, conservation, urban and industrial water stewardship, and climate change adaptation. His experience lie on the issues related to watershed management, drinking water and sanitation, and river pollution management. His contribution to the Namami Gange campaign is also a worth mention. Now I would like to invite our next panelist, Mr. Raja Pandian R. He is a Chief Executive Officer, Sustainable Healthcare Advancement Trust of Dhan Foundation. Mr. Raja Pandian is an agriculturist and MBA by education and has spent over 2 decades in the development sector. He started his career as a project executive in Dhan Foundation and has grown to be leading and heading the healthcare vertical of Dhan Foundation. Sustainable healthcare advancement he is leading, and his specialization lies in the fields of microfinance, livelihood promotion, health, nutrition, sanitation, and institutional development. He is part of the strategic team in designing open defecation free block under the project of State Planning Commission, Tamil Nadu. And he has extensive understanding of the program implementation at the grassroots. With this introduction, now I hand over the deliberations of today's discussion to our distinguished chair to take it forward. And before we start the panel discussion, I would also like to inform and share that for today's session we have received so many requests for the presentations. Since the format of this session was to have the brainstorming within a very limited time, so we could not include those presentations. But I'm very happy that 4 or 5 people who have contributed the paper on this role of civil society, they are present here in this deliberation, and they are free to put their views, opinion and suggestions after the panel finish during the our brainstorming session. So with this, I request our chair, Mr. A.B. Pandya, to take the lead for the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my fellow co-panelists and friends. It's a matter of great pleasure that we have gathered here today under the aegis of India Water Week about the discussing the role of civil society in efficient water management. The water management is essentially a community-based exercise. Every person on the earth is a stakeholder in management of water, and it is the responsibility, being a common pool resource, it is a responsibility on every individual to provide the efficient management so that the limited resources can be shared by everybody. However, in order to carry out this, various skill sets are needed, various initiatives are needed, various persuasions are needed, and the policymakers and the governmental agencies or the other higher level agencies have a limited reach. They cannot really reach every nook and corner because of the limitations of time and the resources, and there the role of civil society becomes very important. Civil societies and civil society organizations are primarily associated with the local population in which they are working. At the grassroots level, they have a day-to-day contact with the stakeholders, and thereby providing a very vital interface between the policies and the ultimate beneficiaries, and also guide the implementers in what direction you should take the initiative so that you are in a position to deliver the results to the ground. So this particular area is something that is very important, and there in the today's panel discussion we have formulated certain key questions which we would like that the gathering and our panelists, we together try to answer or try to at least highlight the issues underlying those questions. That how is the civil society organizations have contributed to water management in local, state and national contexts in the country? What are the opportunities and challenges for CSOs in addressing the water issues? How are the governments helping CSOs in doing their work? And are our water management practices in decision making, planning, executing, are providing adequate space to CSOs for playing their coveted role in this area? How is the role and functioning of CSOs changing with the time in Indian context? And how are the CSO coping with the emerging challenges of water management in the country? So we have a very large arena of questions which are required to be addressed. Since we have also started with certain amount of time delay, so we will go for the opinions of the panelists right away, and there I would request all the panelists to generally provide their views in about 5 to 7 minutes of time, so that we all have enough time at the end to have discussions. So at the first stage, I will request Mr. Madhavan, Chief Executive Water Aid India, to provide his views in the matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pandya. So I'm going to try and talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges that civil society organizations are addressing, helping address with regard to water issues in India. At the outset, let me try and set the context. I think it's important for us to look at what are the strengths and weaknesses of civil society organizations, and then to look at what are the challenges that we're trying to see a role for CSOs in addressing. So I think one of the weaknesses of civil society organizations is our inability to deliver at scale. That's not really our strength. However, civil society organizations inherently possess three strengths that are very important and relevant for this conversation. The first is flexibility. The second is the ability to innovate quickly, and very often to find innovations that are relatively low cost. And the third, I think, strength of civil society organizations is their ability to mobilize communities and to try and create ownership amongst communities, without which, like Mr. Pandya said, we would not be able to address our water challenges in this country. I'm going to try and situate this in four broad areas. The issue around water quality, challenge around water quality that we're faced with, the question of institutions, the health of institutions in this country, and the interface of citizens and the accountability of the state to citizens. The third is on source sustainability, and lastly on climate change. So let's start with water quality. And I think there are 3 or 4 critical roles that civil society organizations can play with regard to addressing the water quality challenges that are growing very rapidly in this country. And the first is around getting communities to understand the importance of water quality. Unfortunately, most communities would look at water, if it is clear, if there is no odor, if there is no particular taste, they will assume that the water is safe for consumption, but that unfortunately is not the truth. And so you have many instances where you have communities where the only source of water has chemical contamination, fluoride, arsenic, but it takes time to wean them away from it to consume safe drinking water. And so the first is a challenge of changing behaviors around water and water quality. The second role that civil society organizations can play is with regard to surveillance and monitoring. The quality of data available on a national scale of water quality in this country continues to be very, very poor. And civil society organizations have a role that they could play in surveillance and monitoring of water quality, to ideally collaborate, find a way to pool all of this data, and to possibly even create a map of water quality in this country. The third area related to where civil society organizations can play is to focus on community-based water purification systems. Now, the market is very efficient at providing services, and the market is likely to look at household-level purification systems, which would tend to leave certain sections of our population behind. And therefore, civil society organizations have a tremendous role to play in to try and keep the focus on community-based purification systems that will provide access equitably. But there are 2 major challenges that we are faced with. The first is around testing infrastructure. Now, while as part of Jal Jeevan Mission, there is an effort to try and ensure that every district has an NABL accredited lab, but the fact of the matter is, whether urban or rural, it is very hard to get your water quality tested. There are problems with the incentive structure, and in the absence of this, the first principle that you would expect to be followed with regard to water quality doesn't get followed, which is that your choice of purification system has to be based on the test results. Now, today you can sit at home in a city in India, you can order a pathology test, someone comes home, collects the sample, your results are delivered to you by phone or email by the evening. You can't imagine doing this for water quality. And unless we are able to improve access to water quality testing and democratize access to it, we're not going to be able to solve the problem. The second is there's a very significant reliance on field testing kits for water quality. Unfortunately, there are no BIS standards for field testing kits. So while you're using and deploying field testing kits in large numbers, there are no standards that can provide assurance of whether these kits are actually reliable or not. The third issue and challenge with regard to water quality is the problem of bacterial contamination, which is that today there is information available on chemical contamination, but there's very poor information available on bacterial contamination. And it seems as if we have assumed that it is either a second order problem that can be solved later, or it's a problem that doesn't exist. And today in large drinking water schemes, we are seeing that even chlorination, which was considered to be a simple way to address this, has now not been followed at all. Let's move to the second issue, which is around institutions and their capacities. Both in a rural context, the relevance and importance of Panchayati Raj institutions, and in an urban context, urban local bodies, as well as public utilities. Now, there is a need to invest in awareness, knowledge, and capacities of Panchayati Raj institutions. And why is this important? Because if we don't invest in their capacities, we will not be able to generate demand for better quality services. If in the absence of demand and awareness, you can't focus on conservation. And ideally, you would want leadership to be assumed by community-based institutions and for them to own these processes. Now, Jal Jeevan Mission is being rolled out on a massive scale, and Jal Jeevan Mission recognizes the challenges around operation and maintenance and seeks to try and get communities to take ownership over this. But this is likely to remain a challenge till we can find ways of investing in their capacities on large scale. Now, if you were to look at utilities and our public utilities, one of the problems is that there are challenges around financing of our utilities. There's very little information about the financial health of our utilities, the capacities of our utilities. To take, for example, Delhi Jal Board. I'd be very surprised if Delhi Jal Board had more than 3 or 4 hydrogeologists. It is likely that more than 50% of drinking water requirements in Delhi are met by groundwater. Now, where is the capacity in the utility to be able to address this if you have such high reliance on groundwater? And the third issue is around tariffs and pricing. This is a myth that poor are unwilling to pay for water and good quality water. There is also a myth that is being perpetuated that having tariffs will necessarily exclude the poor. Whereas the reality is that the poor continue to pay a very significant proportion of their income on accessing water. It's just that we don't recognize it. And therefore, I think we need to address this. The last is around service standards. There are now service standards for utilities, for whether they're rural utilities or public utilities in a city-urban context. But there's very little information available with citizens about what these service standards are. Now, if you don't as a citizen know what is the standard that your utility or your service provider is expected to provide, how can you even hold them accountable? And I think there's a role that civil society organizations can play to try and publicize what are these service level standards so that state and state agencies can be held accountable. The third issue that I will briefly talk about is around source sustainability, source reliability and long-term sustainability of it. And there are two issues. We tend to focus on supply side problems, but we don't spend enough time on demand side problems. And there has been a lot of work that's been done by civil society organizations on water use efficiency in agriculture, whether it's the use of moisture meters, whether it's the use of micro irrigation, or in promoting changes in cropping pattern. There's also been attempts by civil society organizations to promote large-scale water budgeting so that communities are able to recognize the trade-offs that are inherent about water use and consumption. But there's also work that's been done on supply side, which is conservation, whether it's of lakes, tanks and ponds and their revival, to enhance storage, whether through farm ponds or at a community level to enhance infiltration and to look at recharge. But I think we need to recognize that there's also the need to look at recycling, reuse of water. There are two major challenges that we're faced with. One, very poor, good data about the recharge zones of aquifers. Despite the National Aquifer Mapping Program, we have very little information available at a level which can be used to identify where recharge zones are so that you can maximize your infiltration there. And there is very little information about the surface and groundwater linkages, about how both of these are inherently related to each other and therefore what needs to happen. In closure, I will also lastly just touch upon the fact that climate change is imposing new challenges on us. And there is a need for us to look at creating water resilient systems and processes so that communities are able to cope with adverse climatic events. We need institutional mechanisms for partnerships between CSOs and the government, which don't exist today. We need to look at platforms for CSOs and government to interact on a regular basis to receive and provide feedback. And we should be exploring the possibility of CSOs actually being supported by the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madhavan. And now we will have Mr. Suresh Babu from the River Basin and Water Policy WWF India to make their intervention. Kindly conclude your presentation or your intervention in about 7 to 8 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start from where Mr. Madhavan entered. So he talked about the platforms that need to be put in for regular interaction and exchange of civil society and government. I've been asked to talk on government CSO collaboration. So I would like to take it one step further to say that we've been working with the Namami Gange program and state missions for Clean Ganga in a couple of places to create multi-stakeholder platforms, because water being shared, there are conflicting water users, industry, agriculture, domestic, and the idea of a shared vision never emerges. And I think one of the things that we've been able to work very closely with government institutions and other partners, industries as well as the local communities, is to create that kind of a platform where people could come share their ideas around how a basin need to be managed. It looks very ideal and impossible, but we've been able to sort of manage to get a negotiated process out in some of the rivers, and I just want to name few in a river called Ramganga, where Moradabad is a highly polluting city and there is a brassware industry there. There is Ramganga irrigation system where water use efficiency is a concern, and also the domestic. It's 1 million plus cities, 2 cities are coming in. So we could actually bring these guys together. When you actually started that process, everyone was skeptical and everyone was thinking that the other stakeholder group need to act first and I'll come later. But when we actually sat together and tried to find out, what is that one issue that cuts across? Groundwater emerged as a major concern for this basin, because Ramganga is an aquifer-fed river and none of the basin stakeholders receive Ramganga water for drinking or industrial purposes. Now we work back. If the groundwater has to be restored, what needs to be done? So people said that, okay, wetlands were there and wetlands are just disappearing, and that's kind of an entry point. So I think civil society groups has an immense potential to contribute to this negotiated process, because it takes time, it requires capacity, it needs constant engagement. And as Mr. Madhavan said, how do you sort of scale these initiatives? We civil societies don't have the capacity to scale it up at a large basin scale or across all the states. So how do you see some of these lessons emerging from some of these smaller rivers? We are working in Arkavadi, one small stream in the Arkavadi, where we were able to bring together few stakeholder groups. Industries are investing in wetland restoration, streams are getting revived. But that's not enough for the Arkavadi to get revived, because the issues are manifold and very, very challenging. So number one, this collaboration looks good, but how do we scale up? So what is kind of, enabling environment that is required to take this up? The second part I would like to also highlight here is that the decision space. Civil society groups are working very, very closely with several state and national government institutions to look at the future trajectory of water management or river rejuvenation programs in the country. For instance, you will remember quite some years back the idea of engaging with a sector which is consuming more water was never part of a river rejuvenation strategy. And now, agriculture is actually a mainstream strategy in getting, the availability of many of our rivers, the continuous flow in our rivers. Now, if that has to be realized, CSOs play the role of a development partner. As Mr. Madhavan said and the chair said, many institutions are working on water use efficiencies at the farm level, at the irrigation infrastructure level, etc. But now in a river rejuvenation lens, how do you sort of bring those guys together? So that is another area that civil societies can probably look at. The third one, I would say that linked to the second one, we work a lot on biodiversity conservation. Now rivers are huge. The species occupancy of a particular river space is very, very dynamic. It depends on the season, it depends on the various habitat conditions. There is no way a government institution can monitor. how the species move upstream or downstream. And this requires a collaboration between the riparian stakeholders and civil society organization and the government. We are working with the Punjab Department of Forest and Wildlife to monitor the last remaining population of Indus River dolphins. And we have established a network of dolphin mitras, who has been given a tool and they have been trained to monitor these dolphins. And if there a threat emerges, immediate message goes to the forest department, who can actually intervene to rescue that animal. Similarly, in Uttar Pradesh as well, it's not just WWF, there are other institutions who are working on this. And this also creates an invaluable set of data on how the species are responding to various habitat challenges. Again, a point that Mr. Madhavan said, data is very, very scarce at this point in time to take a decision on what needs to be done to protect the habitat of such species. The last point that I wanted to highlight is also that there are several innovative areas that one can work on in terms of river rejuvenation. I would like to highlight one of the least addressed areas around cleaner technologies for industries. So there are several research work that is kept in the shelves of research institutions, and that needs to be popularized. I think CSOs, again, with technical partners and the government institutions, are in a position to take that out and get it implemented at scale. Now again, scale issue will come and can be only addressed when an enabling law or a environment is created by government institutions. Again, an example of work in Tirupur that we are doing. We are trying out cleaner technologies and water and climate smart interventions in textile sector. Now, we are working closely with the regulators there and also the municipal corporation to ensure that this gets scaled up. Otherwise, it will remain within 100 units of textiles in Tirupur, which will make no impact on the Noyal River. So, three things: decision space, as a development partner, building capacities of all the stakeholders, and third, looking at innovations getting scaled up at a level that it matters to the resource which we are talking about, which is rivers or wetlands that we are concerned about. So that I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh Babu. Your work on Ramganga catchment is well recognized, and definitely it has certain lessons in managing the water and also the eco services. Now we'll have Dr. Nupur Bahadur. She is Senior Fellow in Research NMCG, TERI, CEO Center of Excellence on Water Reuse. Yeah. So kindly have your discussion in about 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, India Water Partnership, for this invitation. It is really very important and very apt to be here to be representing one of the well-known and prestigious civil society organization, the Energy and Resources Institute. So we are in the 48th year of our existence. So here I am very proud to represent TERI at this forum. And now the points which I would like to highlight here is how the role and functioning of CSOs changing, and what are the emerging challenges which CSOs are facing and how they are coping up. So these are very vital for existence and the functioning of the CSOs, particularly now when there are a lot of CSOs in the ring, and particularly post-COVID or during the last 2 years which we have faced. So taking the first thing, like the challenges which CSOs particularly face. So first challenge which comes to all of us is the finances. And finance is an all-time challenge for any CSO. So to manage the funds, to work and bearing such times which we had for last 2 years has been a real testament for many of the CSOs. And secondly, finances are also affected today when the patterns, the funding patterns, the stringent regulations for the use of CSR funds, the international funding has changed, and the application of IT is also into perspective. So these are actually hampering or affecting the donor partners. So this is something which we have to look, and government has to facilitate the civil society organizations. Then, as I said, the large number of CSOs are there, large number of different kinds are in the same sector. So this is a good, we have a healthy competition, but there is competition among the CSOs, and many of them work in silos. So what we need today is to work together to have the strengths of each of the organizations, and if together we can come up in a big way. This is the need of the hour. And one very important issue which is felt by most of the CSOs is that CSOs are generally not included in the planning or budgeting phase. While at the implementation stage, we are required, because CSOs are the ones who actually deliver on ground. So something is really needed at this point as well, when CSOs could be involved right from the planning to budgeting and until the execution and to taking it to the policy intervention as well. So this is one thing. And then looking at the inclusiveness, we would say still in India, we have to include more. Like today, we have government in the national missions or various, it's a people's movement, participation of masses in involved. So this is a huge encouraging sign for us, where all kinds, or everybody is involved. But still in India, we have to see more inclusiveness towards the gender parity, more inclusion of the women. The youth is still missing in the water sector, I would say, actively. We have brought participation of the schools at different levels, but still much more need to be done to include a lot more. And last challenge, I would say, is the scale, as rightly mentioned by Mr. Madhavan, that NGOs, they are delivering right there, but scale is something really, it's a challenge for us. But having limited resources in terms of funds and manpower, getting into up to many levels is very difficult, and still we are achieving. So to achieve the scales, we need the industry participation, the industry funding, industry standing with the CSOs for coming up. So here, as there are discussions, we have CSR, if we can have social, just like social corporate responsibility, if we have something called social innovation, where corporates can fund for the research and development of the CSOs and work with the CSOs, they can come up in a big way. And second, and the last point is the role of changing, a role of change, how CSOs have changed. So we all know that earlier, if we talk about 3 decades ago, 4 decades ago, so CSOs generally, they started as more as activists, but today they are more on advocacy part they are having. Earlier they were considered as sleepy organizations, but today the CSOs are more brand conscious, they have the better outreach and the direct outreach to the government, to implementation through various social media. So this is a big change which we all have seen in these years, I would say. And then earlier, CSOs were just presenting the information, kind of centers were there. But now CSOs have transformed themselves. They are more into the core research, and interdisciplinary teams have come at every level in the CSOs. This is a very big change which we have seen. And now the interventions are more R&D based, what we can say, something which is more practical, doable, and the policy interventions are something which has come out of deep research and studies. And how to cope today, so CSOs certainly need more government involvement, which we have today. Now we have recognition from the governments, various national missions. In fact, major component of success of the national mission, especially the Namami Gange, I would say, which I am closely working with, it has seen huge involvement And just one example to cite that what NMCG has done is remarkable, that they have identified many CSOs having strengths in different sectors and established funding or the centers for there. For example, any organization working in fecal sludge management, so NMCG is working closely with them. If we are working on the technology domain, they have come and we have funded together a center of excellence on technology domain. So this way, national missions are now recognizing the NGOs and the civil society organizations. And together, I think we can move ahead, and all participation from government and industry, and together among the NGOs and CSOs is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nupur, for also completing on dot. Now, I'll request Mr. Shawahik Siddiqui, Indian Environmental Law Organization, and also our, as I can say, our legal eagle.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Now, from a law practitioner's perspective, there are preemptory questions of practical importance. For example, how do you define a CSO? And what is the role clarity in terms of CSOs? क्या वाटर यूज एसोसिएशन को CSO मानेंगे, नहीं मानेंगे, या सिर्फ NGOs को मानेंगे? So that practical interpretation, deciphering of CSOs is there in terms of when you look at from the legal perspective and institutional perspective. Irrespective of that fact, there's a little brief here, and as a lawyer, we are trained that whenever you're given a brief, you have to stick to that brief. Now I'll apply the test of reasonable assumption, which is that there's a question mentioned against my name, so I'll pick that question as my brief, and it has 3 keywords, which is decision making, planning, executing. Where is the role of CSOs in all of this? Alternatively, what is being asked is, and what we're trying to reflect as a panel is, that from conception to execution, when it comes to water use efficiency, is there a space for CSOs? If yes, and is it adequate? So there can be a straightforward answer to this. The answer is yes, with a profound but. The profound but can be qualified with not adequate, on the sidelines, if you try and put it within the framework of the wordings of National Water Policy. So there are, as we know, in the National Water Policy 2012, there are these 10 principles, and there is this specific principle under 1.3, the third principle, which says meaningful participation of communities. In fact, it has a little word before meaningful. It says intense meaningful participation. So is the current space for CSOs, does that fit within the framework of intense meaningful participation? Why do I say there's a profound but? I'll give you 3 small examples, very briefly, sir. Now, first begins with our little own experience of generating a lot of civil society driven evidence for creating a National Bureau of Water Use Efficiency. The formal story of water use efficiency begins, in India at least, begins in 2009, where we had this target of 20% in the volume 1 of National Water Mission that was released in 2009. We picked that number and tried to look at that. It's a kind of a ambitious number. How are we trying to achieve it? Given that within the entry 17 of the Constitution, the mandate for whatever it is for the state, it's not efficiency, at least it's not worded, then you need a kind of an institution. You want to imagine an institution that will try and do it. The pattern, of course, the model was to look at the Bureau of Energy Efficiency the way it has done since 2001 under the Energy Conservation Act. And there's a remarkable progress that it has made at the consumer level, where each household is inclined to buy CFL. So we wanted to study that, apply it to water. How do you create a demand-driven water use efficiency to the end user level? So from there was a lot of receptivity within the Ministry of Water Resources, which used to be at that time, now Jal Shakti. And with good bureaucratic leadership, we tried to create a kind of a civil society-driven institutional model. 8 state consultations, 12 district consultations. We have some of our mentors sitting in this hall who were involved, for example, in Maharashtra. Pandit sir was involved. So we've done that long exercise and we came up with that model. The main hurdle for the ministry was how do you create an institution on a subject which is tightly a state subject, that is water. So we came up with that solution that under the Environment Protection Act, a notification can be brought. Lot of energy was generated from states in terms of its receptivity, buying, a lot of ideas that came in. Now, following that exercise, Vincent Palaji in 2012 also announced, the minister then, that there's going to be a bureau. 2012 cut to 2022. We have lost a lot of momentum on Bureau of Water Use Efficiency. What could have been done is at least to keep the momentum alive, generate a lot of evidence, a lot of buy-in, and the readiness and the preparedness for this bureau to take off. Now that is why I say but. So there was this civil society involvement, but it is qualified, it has not seen the light of the day, and we are now told that it has come up in the form of a memorandum, which was not the idea actually, because the memorandum in law is a kind of a weak instrument which can go to a certain length, then it stops. So therefore, that is number one. Second instance, I'll give you a yes, but a profound but could be from the national water policy itself. You see, within the national water policy, there are 5-fold emphasis on water use efficiency. One is a principle itself. Second is a strategy, climate adaptation strategy. Third is pricing. Fourth is the planning from the efficiency benchmarking standard. And fifth is other involvement and other things. So 5-fold emphasis on water use efficiency. The call of National Water Policy 2012 was, which followed the mission of 2009, that each state will revise and revamp its state policy in tune with the National Water Policy. IWP के माध्यम से हमने कई राज्यों का आंकलन किया कि कितने states ने उसको revise किया, कितनों ने नहीं किया, और recently जिन्होंने किया, so called progressive states such as Karnataka, उत्तर प्रदेश की last year हमने draft करी है. You see the emphasis on water use efficiency and the way states have gone about effecting it is very menial. It does not serve the purpose the way it should serve, given the emphasis in the national water policy. Now, why it has happened? As I said, in the last 10 years, we have not seen intense involvement in debate of civil societies. Governments can get tied up in a number of things. They have got huge responsibilities and roles and plans to follow, but civil society can keep the momentum alive, and that is why I say that there is a role, there is a space, but has qualified. It has been qualified with, but it is not adequate. The third example, I'll give you a classic example which is connected, which is the formulation of state climate action plans. It is integrated. Everything has to come together. Now, if you try and look at just half a dozen climate action plans in terms of how have they gone about civil society consultations, and you can pick 5-6 of them, except in few instances, the draft was consulted with civil societies. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, there's been a lot of consultation. The draft has gone back to civil society at the final stage and then been kind of formalized. In other states, it has not happened. The consultations have happened, but the final draft has not gone for input. So therefore, I think there is a space at the moment, but the effective, the intense, in the spirit of what national water policy calls for is not there. I think we'll stop there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siddiqui. Mr. Siddiqui. And now we have Mr. Raja Pandian. He is the CEO of Sustainable Healthcare Advancement Trust of Dhan Foundation.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, all of you. I represent the civil society organization, so Dhan Foundation. Is closely working with around 5 lakh farmers, small and marginal farmers, and have experience of working with nearly 5,000 tanks, renovation of tanks, and have experience with around 31 river basins. And we closely working with the community through promoting the tank associations. Across the country, we have around nearly 6,500 tank associations. From the experience of last 25 years, so we find So 5 major roles, broadly I could say it's a 5 major roles the civil society organization has. One is the enabling, the role of enabling a demand and supply systems towards ensuring accessibility, availability, affordability and quality. This is the first major role. As a civil society organization, enabling is one of the major role. The second is the building an active partnership. That's very, very critical. When you want to achieve something, definitely you should have a very strong partnership because it's one of the core value of Dawn. It's a collaboration. That's another area, mainly for leveraging and also mobilizing resources. The third thing is leveraging from mainstream institutions. That's very, very critical. So how do you bring the partners for leveraging, for supporting the community and also ensuring this water management in the field? The fourth is on what is the kind of this community framework? What is the kind of the community framework? To set a community framework mainly for promoting the social capital. That means the tank associations or any other farmer groups or a user group or whatever it is. So how do we set a community framework to ensure the sustainability over a period of time? That is a critical thing. The sustainability is a critical thing. Finally, the contribution to the policies. The policies from the framework of the practice. What is the framework you are following from the policies from the practice? That is another the major role. These are the 5 major roles that each CSO has, and also based on that actually because we defined some kind of the partnership framework. So what is the kind of the partnership framework for us? Because the building active partnership, so only with the government, I think it's not possible for ensuring everything. Definitely we need to leverage from some other sources. Especially, there are different kind of the partners are available. In our perspective, community is the prime participant. Because we could not see that the community is a kind of a beneficiary. The community is the primary stakeholder. So we should have a partnership with the community first. So then we have a CSR agencies, donors, we have a government, departments, we have a kind of the NABARD, the banks, PRIs. These are all the partners available in the field, so mainly for contributing for efficient water management. So that is what actually because we showcased in many forums and also we have been successful in many contexts. So there are, we defined the partnerships. What kind of the partnership will bring a kind of a support for the community in the grassroots level? One is a convergence and leveraging the partnership. So we need to converge because we need to have a partnership with all the partners, binding with the community, at the same time leveraging. If you invest 1 rupee, what will you get it out of it? At least 4 rupee or a 5 rupee. That is a kind of the leverage. The second is on the long-term partnership. So instead of going for a projects, long-term partnership with the donors by allocating river basins. At least, okay, one partner is coming, one CSR is coming. Okay, you can take this particular basin take it for next 10 years or 20 years. That's a kind of a long-term partnership. Third thing is a long-term partnership for financial mix. So we could not expect the partners or a financial mix. It may be a kind, it may be a cost, it may be a grant, it may be a loan. It's a kind of the partnership. The partnership has to start from the community contribution. So that's very, very critical thing. At least something has to come from the community, then the ownership will be built. Or otherwise, it's a charity, definitely it will not work it out. And fourth is on a community financing leads to ownership and sustainability. So what is the kind of a community partnership? So what is the kind of the contribution from the community? What tank associations will do? So how they will contribute from their packets? So that is very, very critical. And the partnership advancement with the graduation. So we'll start with a kind of a project. So kind of a program over a period of time. They will be supporting for one location or one particular tank. Maybe in the future they will be coming with 5 tanks. Maybe over a period of time they will become like an institutional partner. So that is a kind of the model we are adapting in the partnership. It will be sustainable. It will be sustainable. Over a period of time, the community will take care of this entire sustainability. Before 25 years, we promoted nearly 10 tanks. Even that tanks are even managed by the community themselves at present. So that is the kind of the fund they allocated. They find the fund they created, like a corpus fund they created for maintaining those kind of the tanks, and managed by the tank association over a period of time. That is the kind of the partnership model. So we are suggesting it's mainly for way forward. The kind of a leads. So one lead is kind of a network of the civil society organizations, mainly for knowledge sharing. So maybe IWP can work on this networking of the civil society organizations for knowledge sharing and replication of models. Because this Niti Aayog has suggested and acknowledged and accepted our model. It's a kind of one of the best model for replication. So there's a kind of the same kind of the work can be taken by this IWP. Then facilitating a civil society organization to link with the technical institutions. What we are in need now at present. The technical institution support for the civil society organization is quite critical now. Because how do we bring a new knowledge to the system, existing systems? The third thing is kind of the showcasing and advancing the best practices of the community. Because there is a huge wisdom and knowledge is available with the community. How do we make use of this knowledge and wisdom to the community to the next level of advancement? That is a very, very critical thing. So these are the major areas that we want to concentrate it. Over a period of time, this will bring a changes in the policy level also. Because we start with a very small level, and over a period of time, the policy changes also can happen with this kind of the system and knowledge come from the community. So community has the power to share the knowledge. So we cannot avoid the community. It's just a community, because community has the power and wisdom and knowledge. That is that. This is the word come from our experience of Daan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pandian. Now we have Dr. Asad Umar, Director WASH and Health, Aga Khan Foundation.
Thank you, Chair. It's not easy actually to be the last speaker. Almost all the points have already been covered here. But yeah, a couple of things. Mr. Siddiqui has actually raised quite pertinent questions and issues, I mean, in terms of overall involvement, engagement, and participation of civil society organizations. And he also raised a but. It's perhaps not adequate. Agreed, sir. It is not adequate. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at India as a country, we have almost 15 agroclimatic zones. We have almost 12 major river basins. We have 9 well-defined groundwater provinces. In this country, it is not really easy to actually work around efficient water management practices. But I think this is also a platform which we must and we should actually utilize to also celebrate the success, the efforts that has already been made by civil society organizations. At a time when almost 800 million population of this country is actually on the verge of a sort of water stress conditions. Per capita availability is almost 1,000 cubic meter. This is a moment, then many speakers have also raised issues around climate variability, changes arising out of climate change. I think this is also time for us to reflect on some of the success stories, especially of civil society organizations, how they have actually contributed. We all know since late 70s or early 80s, we have good number of examples. One of the topic which I was actually asked to deliberate on, how civil society organizations have actually effectively engaged and impacted some of the state or national level programs. So here, definitely I would like to highlight some of the fact that, in fact, civil society organizations, you will find clear imprint of CSOs, especially if you just reflect back the way DPAP was implemented, the way Indo-German watershed programs were implemented, the way NABARD supported holistic watershed program or even integrated water resource program were implemented. You name any program at state level or at national level, you will find clear imprint in terms of intense community engagement, in terms of developing a sort of human, building human capital in terms of overall promotion of participatory approaches or equitable distribution of water. So these are certain areas where actually CSOs have played a sort of critical role. Couple of things, I know it is going to be a bit repetitive, and almost in every conference and everywhere you tend to listen to these names. But I thought that again it is really important for me to highlight a couple of good examples before lunch. So at least we can celebrate those examples. Now, I'll just start from Pani Panchayat in Maharashtra. That particular movement have actually Vilas ji has Salunke ji. He has actually somehow instilled a sort of belief in collective wisdom or collective power of communities. That particular movement has actually demonstrated that how a sort of common resources can actually ensure a sort of equitable distribution even in remotest areas. We also know one of the celebrated book by Anupam Mishra ji, how he has actually documented all the good practices with the very famous name Aaj Bhi Khare Hain Talab. That has numerous examples that you will find in that particular book. Everybody knows about Rajendra Singh, Tarun Bharat Sangh, especially in a semi-arid zone, how he has actually made efforts last in 20-25 years in terms of restoration of a river. Almost 10 rivers perhaps, as far as my knowledge is concerned, that has already been, because of Tarun Bharat Sangh's efforts, that has already been restored. Recently, actually, Niti Aayog has come up with sort of a compendium of best practices of, especially on efficient water management, and many good examples of civil society organizations have actually documented in that particular compendium. Couple of them I would definitely like to highlight here. One is, of course, around watershed management, and then again around participatory aquifer management. So a few examples, for example, agencies like how they have actually created a sort of human capital, how they have actually promoted efficient irrigation practices, how they have introduced participatory approaches of water budgeting, how they have actually brought in sort of local wisdom within water resource management. So these are certain aspects where these organizations have actually worked, and I would strongly recommend that one should actually look at that particular compendium in 2021 that was brought in by Niti Aayog. A couple of things, especially how you can actually bring in a sort of scientific rigor into water resource management. Few agencies in recent past, they have demonstrated good examples. For example, one particular agency with the name of Aquadem, everybody knows Himanshu Kulkarni, in Pune. So participatory aquifer management, how you can actually demystify the whole concept of hydrogeology at community level is something that has quite effectively demonstrated by Aquadem. Mr. Madhavan is sitting here, and in his presence, definitely I would like to highlight the examples of participatory aquifer management, especially the spring development that Chirag has done in Kumaon region. Again, I think that was, if I am not wrong, Madhavan, that was also supported by Aragyam in Kumaon region. But yeah, that is again an effective model. Sanjay Singh is sitting right in front of me, especially in Bundelkhand region. How you can actually work around drought proofing through community participations, perhaps. He has quite effectively demonstrated that. Again, because certain time, almost 10 years back, what today Jal Jeevan Mission is actually highlighting is around the resource management, along with ensuring sort of better services through household tap connection. When I say resource management, how you can actually develop and manage your groundwater resources. These kind of examples in Bundelkhand region, 10 years back, agencies like Haritiga, through multi-layered aquifer management, they have quite effectively demonstrated those models in a catchment-based approach, how you can ensure sustainability of drinking water. So these are good examples, and I think a couple of things where still a lot more need to be done. For example, I haven't seen many instances where rigorous documentation or impact of these projects have already been done. Of course, there are many documents you'll find, but in terms of overall impact and its sharing with local communities, I still find that groundwater depletion is a continuous trend, especially if you work on a watershed approach, and if you tend to achieve a sort of desired result, but again community revert back to a water-intensive crop, and that becomes a sort of real challenge. In many cases, what we have seen that we initiate watershed programs, but it is done without a sort of a robust geological feasibility study. So those kind of things, if taken up, then we tend to fail actually in our endeavor to ensure efficient water management practices. I'm not going to take much time, but yes, there are good examples. There are examples where NGOs have conclusively demonstrated that yes, it is possible to actually work at a scale. It is possible to demonstrate good models on the ground. And this is something, and I think this is an opportune time, especially at policy level, when there are platforms where CSOs, through their experiences, can effectively and conclusively contribute towards better water management practices. I would just stop here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Asad, and really it was a very good interaction from all the panelists who provided their vision and their views. One thing I would say is that the civil society organizations also have to play a role of a harbinger of change. There are, on one hand, we have got the communities who have been responding intuitively to the individual issues that are coming up over there, and then the civil society organization has to have a little larger vision and a little elevated vision, so that the projections and the current situations and the change in current situations compared to what has been habituated by that society is brought forward, and then gradually veer the practices towards the sustainable practices. This becomes quite important, because if we try to follow the practices which are continued, maybe they have been continued since centuries, but then the rate of change of development, the rate of change in the current times has gone up in a very different way than what we had in the historical times. So those changes also we have to have a facility, because CSO has got a direct connect with the community. And the community also has to be made aware that we were doing certain things up to certain time in a certain manner, but now the situations have changed, we need to really go over here also. So this is also one of the roles of CSOs. That becomes quite important, because then the disconnect at times felt by the CSOs or by the communities from the policymakers and thinkers who have got this kind of a idea, or have got this kind of an appreciation that this is what has changed. So these two have to be connected, and that is where I think the CSOs will provide a very, very strong and a very, very important linkage. Now we are open for the open house discussion, and also as Veena ji said, if some of the paper presenters paper were presented, so if somebody wants to make a point, but then that point should be brief, very brief, just 1 or 2 minutes, and then we will also invite the questions and responses from the audience. So now the house is open. There are questions here. Last row, last to third row. Yeah, kindly get up, and then we will have another 2. So we will. Can you provide him with a roving mic? Kindly identify yourself briefly so that we are able to record your intervention. So better go from the last one. He was the first one who raised his hand. Keep your intervention short and crisp.
Thank you. I'm Ashish Gupta. I'm basically in the telecom sector, and it was really enlightening for me to hear the kind of initiatives which are there, which brings me to the point. What can we do to ensure that all these initiatives are marketed in a fashion that it reaches to the larger section of society, and we can then learn that collective learning can then be implemented or at least adjusted and adopted in the wider society. I think there is a large work that as a corporates we can do. We are part of many CSR initiatives, but this was something which was enlightening, and I think I was not aware of any of the initiatives. It's kind of, something which brings me again. One, how can we make sure the material is available to us to learn? And then of course, the second part is how do we take the action?
So any of our panelists would like to?
Ashish, I think it's ironic that so you pointed out another weakness of civil society organizations. We're very poor at marketing what we do. And I think this also has to do with whose success actually is it? Is the success of the work that has happened with 5,000 tanks in Tamil Nadu, is that the success of Dhan Foundation, or is the success of the tank user associations or communities? It gets complicated from our perspective as to whose success it really is. And therefore, I think there's been an inherent inability or unwillingness to sort of promote these. But the point I think is very valid, that I think that we've reached a time where we need to find a way of talking about the success, even if it is of communities, so that the impact can actually be expanded by just simply availability of that knowledge. It's a very valid point.
Thank you. So we will have now the next question. Yeah.
Good morning, sir. My name is Prasad Naik. My question is to Rajapandian, sir. I am right now talking in the context of inclusivity and community participation. And as sir rightly said, intense, meaningful community participation. So now the thing is, what I want to put forward is there is a big lack of clarity about the role of CSO amongst the communities. So as far as as all of you have already told today, you are acting as a bridge between community as well as the government. So in that way, don't you think that you can use the local media effectively for connecting the government mechanism with that of community, since you are already working in hand-to-hand with the government, and as I have already told you that there's a big lack of clarity, like our fellow gentleman has already said, that we almost have no idea what CSOs are exactly doing at the ground level. So since Rajpandian sir, you have told us about the massive success of your organization so far, where I think that you have already managed to reach a maximum level of local participation. Have you effectively used, what is the prominent part where the local media has been used? And if so, how it can be, elevated or enlightened to us? I'm asking this because we have lots of CSO people here, as well as the media partners, so we can be, more aware of it. Thank you.
Are you from media?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. Here our major role is so mainly for the enabling. That's the word I just used it. So our first step of intervention itself for orienting the community. So we walk through promoting institutions at grassroots level. So before going into this, the water management, we build the capacity of the community to understand what is being discussed. So there will be some organization has been promoted. So before getting into the work, so once it is getting oriented very well, the community will be take a responsibility, because you just use the word participation. But we are going beyond the word participation. We say it's called ownership. So we build the ownership among the community. That is the first step. So after that, whatever the kind of work, if you are providing to the community, they will take care of it. That means you build the governance. You build the governance among the community. The government will take a responsibility of clearing the doubts and clarifications of the community. So that is the kind of thing. Here, what is the role of media here? It's a role of media. I think we are using the role of media for a mass communication or something. But our major approach is, it's a one-to-one. It's a household to household. That is the kind of approach we are following it up, so that we are organizing them into the group. We are promoting a people institution. The people institution is given orientation or a training to take up this kind of the initiatives. That is the kind of the model. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Pandit has one question. Yeah, because he will have to go a little early. So.
My name is Chetan Pandit. I am a water sector professional. Mr. Madhavan made a point towards the end of his presentation that we still don't have partnerships. CSOs still don't have partnerships with the government. Question is why? Civil society organizations have been kind of prominently around for more than 20 years or maybe more than that. And if still you are saying today that you still don't have partnership with the government, the question arises, why is that so? Could it be because often there is a perception that civil society organizations are pulling in an entirely different direction than what the government wants to go? Is it because of that? Or is it because sometimes there is a perception, particularly in the government, that CSOs they cannot be held responsible for their actions? I mean, a legal entity is one who can sue and who can also be sued. Could these be the reasons? What is lacking?
Thank you, Mr. Pandit. So the point I was making is that there is no institutional mechanism for partnerships. I was not saying that there are no partnerships. There are a host of organizations which partner with district administration, state government. Why I use the term no institutional mechanism for it is, which is that large number of these partnerships are largely dependent on individuals within institutions, including in government. When you have certain individuals in certain positions in government, these partnerships flourish. When that person gets transferred, goes somewhere else, the partnership collapses. So it's not an institutional mechanism, it is still largely individual-centric. That's one point that I was making. The second is that if you were to look at why over a period of time, so there have been different phases, Mr. Pandit, and you're probably aware of this more than anybody else, where at different points of time that we moved from no partnership to very intense partnerships with government, and then you're starting to see a decline over a period of time. Now, some of it has to do with perceptions. It's not just a question of whether CSOs are accountable or not. It is also about the fact that CSOs are considered to be providing information about inconvenient truths. If you're perceived as focusing too much on the part of the glass that is half empty rather than the glass that is half full, then that also poses a challenge. So I think there's also, and both need to work on it. Even CSOs need to work on this, which is that we need to recognize that the challenges that government is faced with are of an entirely different order than that which the CSO is faced with. So we've got to look at providing solutions and not just limiting ourselves to highlighting what the problem is. I think the question about accountability is very valid if you were to take finances. Where there are finances, where finances have been taken, you are accountable. So I think it's a sort of mixed bag, but I think our problem is that we've not found a way to create these relationships in an institutional form.
Just to add to this point, sir, when you say CSOs are not accountable, so in the present time when the system, in last few years I would say now everything is online. Earlier CSOs, NGOs have to register themselves with different other ways, but now having all online applications, all documents in place, having registered in Darpan portal and etc. means, so now CSRs are held responsible with single account treasury, all such measures. Now delivery is on time and the results have to be there, and the more mission mode projects, they are more focused. So therefore now CSOs are more accountable. I would just like to bring to your notice.
Yeah, go ahead.
मेरा सवाल सिद्दीकी साहब से है। मेरा नाम डॉक्टर संजय है और जहाँ तक आप जो बात कर रहे थे पॉलिसीज़ की, क्योंकि मैं पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क में बहुत काम कर रहा हूँ राइट टू वाटर को लेके जितने भी स्टेट्स में, लेकिन मैं जहाँ तक समझ रहा हूँ मेरा सवाल ये है कि सिविल सोसाइटी की जो डेफिनेशंस है, मैं जहाँ तक समझ रहा हूँ कि स्पेस लगातार सिंकिंग हो रहा है। आज हम किन के साथ डिस्कशंस कर रहे हैं, ये लाइकिंग डिसलाइकिंग है। बहुत सारे अगर आप 2000 के पहले के दशक के लोगों को देखेंगे तो कुछ जैसे नाम अभी उमर साहब ने जिक्र किया, कुछ गिने चुने नाम। अब हम किन के साथ डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, भारत की जो नीति बन रही उसमें कौन लोग हैं और किस तरह के और बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस एक तरफ हैं लेकिन डिस्कशंस में दूसरे लोग हैं। तो आखिर हम कैसे ये कल्पना कर सकते हैं कि पॉलिसी में जिन्होंने अपने जीवन को खपाया है, लगाया है, उनके अनुभव कैसे आ सकेंगे। मैं जहाँ तक समझता हूँ, क्योंकि मैं 3-4 राज्यों की पॉलिसीज़ का हिस्सा हूँ, इसलिए ये बात बड़ी एक बहुत ही समृद्ध पैनल है उसके सामने ये बात रख रहा हूँ। थैंक यू।
संजय जी, जितना मैं समझ पाया हूँ आप शायद सवाल ये कर रहे हैं कि अब CSOs का रोल कैसा होना चाहिए बदलती नीतियों के संदर्भ में, शायद लगभग, अगर मैं वहाँ पहुँचा हूँ।
नीतियाँ जो बन रही हैं उनमें बहुत ही कम स्पेस रह गया, उनसे डिस्कशंस के फोरम ही खत्म हो गए।
जी, श्रिंकिंग स्पेस हो गया, ये एक कंसर्न है। देखिए 2012 की जो नीति है उसका बड़ा डिपार्चर है रिसोर्स के संदर्भ में अगर बात करेंगे, बिल्कुल वैसे ही जैसे 52 की फॉरेस्ट पॉलिसी से 88 की फॉरेस्ट पॉलिसी का डिपार्चर था। तो 52 में हमने फॉरेस्ट में कम्युनिटी को नहीं लिया, 88 में मेन स्ट्रीम करने का प्रयास किया। 2012 की जो वाटर पॉलिसी है उसमें देखिए 3, अगर आप सिर्फ स्पेसिफिक टू दिस फोरम की बात करें, एफिशिएंसी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बताता हूँ, डेफिशिएंसी को मिटिगेट कर सकते हैं एफिशिएंसी से, जो क्रिएट कर सकती है सफिशिएंसी। ये अप्रोच है नेशनल वाटर पॉलिसी का, बॉटम अप अप्रोच है। अभी तक प्रावधान क्या रहा कि सफिशिएंसी क्रिएट करिए, लार्ज वाटर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाते हैं, स्टोरेज इंस्ट्रक्चर्स, कैनाल, सप्लाईज, और उससे डेफिशिएंसी को कम करते हैं। बीच में एफिशिएंसी कहीं नहीं थी। जब एफिशिएंसी पॉलिसी पैराडाइम बन गया तो बगैर नागरिक के और बगैर CSOs के उसको अचीव करना संभव ही नहीं है। मैं आपको सीधा उदाहरण देता हूँ, जैसे अब वाटर रीयूज, रीसाइकिल, ट्रीटमेंट के बिना पॉलिसी पैराडाइम में बात नहीं हो पा रही है। देयर इज अ बिग पैराडाइम इमर्जिंग दैट अनलेस वी स्टार्ट रीयूजिंग द एफिशिएंसी टारगेट्स विल नॉट बी अचीव्ड। नेशनल कमीशन ऑन इंटीग्रेटेड वाटर रिसोर्स डेवलपमेंट का बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग एक डेटा है जो कहता है कि 2050 तक वाटर यूज़ कम हो जाएगा। पानी तो कम होगा लेकिन यूज़ भी कम हो जाएगा, क्योंकि 30% एफिशिएंसी का अजम्पशन है। वो उस पे है कि रीयूज़ रीसाइकिल होगा। रीयूज़ का सबसे पहला चरण है सोशल एक्सेप्टेंस। जो ट्रीटेड वाटर, हमारे यहाँ पानी की जो एक धार्मिक कल्पना है, उसके साथ जो एक संस्कृति जुड़ी हुई है, उसका जो डेली जीवन यापन का है, आप बुंदेलखंड से आते हैं और मैं भी वहीं से आता हूँ, तो जहाँ से हम समझते हैं जिस भूमि को, उसके संदर्भ में भी बात करें तो पानी का जो एक सांस्कृतिक स्वरूप है हमारे यहाँ, उसमें रीयूज रीसाइकिल का एक्सेप्टेंस इतना आसान नहीं होगा। तो जो श्रिंकिंग स्पेस की आप बात कर रहे हैं, उस स्पेस को रीडिफाइन करना होगा नीतिगत। स्ट्रिक्टली स्पीकिंग, फ्रॉम द इंटरप्रिटेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, देयर इज नो लैक ऑफ स्पेस, लेट मी टेल यू दैट। देयर पॉलिसीज आर क्लियरली वर्डेड, 2012 की पॉलिसी भी, अदर पॉलिसी इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स भी, और अब जो SDGs के संदर्भ में आ रहे हैं, या जो नीति आयोग कह रहा है, या जो स्प्रिंग मैनेजमेंट के संदर्भ में पहाड़ी राज्यों में देखने को मिला, पॉलिसीज वर्डेड नहीं हैं स्क्यूड तरीके से। उसका क्रियान्वयन, इंटरप्रिटेशन और लिंकेजेस में प्रॉब्लम है। तो आई थिंक इट इज़ फॉर नाउ सिविल सोसाइटी टू एंगेज क्रिएटिवली ऑल्सो। पार्टनरशिप्स की बात माधवन साहब ने बताई। So I think the idea is now to also to engage creatively and create that space for itself. The law is very clear. There is a constitutional imperative for people to be involved. There is a policy space for people to be involved. And now at a project level also there are spaces whereby communities need to be involved. जैसे अटल भूजल का पूरा मुख्य बिंदु ही यही है, अटल भूजल योजना का, कि आप परसेप्शन के माध्यम से, माइंडसेट चेंज करने के माध्यम से ग्राउंड वाटर कंजर्व करेंगे। Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think.
Thank you. We will have one last question from this gentleman, and then we will try to give 1 or 2 minutes to each of the presenters who have provided their papers in this particular session. but that will be very, very brief. Please.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Yogendra Babu Sarma here from Central Groundwater Board. And this is in series of the question which was floated earlier, but I would just dilute and it should be very humorous. Role of civil societies had been always eminent throughout all the phases of human civilization. So it was prominent in decision making, policy making, or probably in implementing all the programs. So all the phases. And literally we can't achieve anything, either at local governance level or probably in recent years. All SDGs, 17 goals we can't achieve without the involvement of the civil societies, and they have been endorsed at all levels, either at community level or from Panchayati Raj institutions or from state level governance. My question comes, sir, Chair, sir, I would make it brief. I would brief it. So, because of this conflict, I had been hearing for past 30 years, I had been the part of both the sides. I started my career with CFOs and then now I'm with the government. The question comes, how we can make this relationship like a symbiosis? Because of it has been always conflicting. We feel like inclusiveness is still missing. So why the panelists, they suggest some solution that this relationship with CFOs and the government could be improved further. Come out with at least 1 or 2 points each of you and you say that yes, this can be done. And that should be the progress and that should be actually the something very good for this session.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I would like to rather say is that the CSO is an interface. Civil society organizations are an interface, and the interface has to have two faces: a government face and also a community face. And they are the kind of marketing organizations who have to listen from various other sources, especially from the government, because as of now, the expertise and the understanding at the macro level that is available is largely available at the governmental level. We do not have water sector in which we have significant private participation. The private participation may be there at a very, very restricted level in water treatment areas, but rest of the area, no. On the other side, these new areas and new concepts which have to be fitted in the overall macro concept has to be translated into micro, and then that has to be provided to the community. So you have two roles. You have to shop for the ideas, you have to understand the ideas which are going to ultimately fit in an overall sense of the development, and then you have to tailor the community perceptions so that these ideas are also there in order to implement them. In the process, whatever experience you learn, you have to again pass it back to those people who are generating those ideas so that those ideas can also be tailored. So that is the role of interface. And that is the role of CSOs in promoting all the issues, especially the water use efficiency. So now I think we can have one or two small interventions from the individual who have presented the paper. So have you presented the paper or you are raising a question? Yeah. So please tell in 1 or 2 minutes what are your conclusions as far as your paper is concerned. We will only listen to your conclusions. We don't want to listen to the modalities and the theory behind it.
Yes, sir. This is V. Venkatesan from Dawn Foundation, Madurai, in which in my paper was presenting about the 25 years of Dawn Foundation as part of sustainable management of water commons through the community participation. I would like to reinforce 2 points here. Yeah. So the efficient water management, the word efficient is not a simple word. It calls for mutual responsibility, equality, and giving up for the benefit of others. So 2 points which I would like to mention here is, one is the role of civil society is not only making the community enjoy the benefit, basically making them to invest on the common properties. So if you look at the Dawn Foundation experience, so far 250 crores of water conservation work has happened across the country, of which 50 crores of contribution has been given by the community. They invested on the common property. So that made them to own their water bodies on a sustainable basis. Whether Dawn is there or not, they will take care of that. That is the kind of model that has been established. And second one is the role of this social organization is to promote similar kind of civil society organization at the context level. So the 6,000 water bodies, what has been mentioned by Mr. Rajapandian, it has promoted 200 federations at the block level. So that gives the identity for the local community. It has grown as a civil society organization and they are taking care of themselves. This is what I would like to suggest here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I think we are, of course, very much out of the time now, and we are already at 1:15, so that is encroaching upon your lunch. So at the end, I would like to conclude the session by saying that the role of the civil society in efficient water management is something that cannot be avoided. Secondly, this role has to be understood and managed at a what I will call in a collaborative manner. If we try to go in a combative manner, where we try to kind of prove a point against somebody, then that sort of collaboration that sort of competition will not work. The best way to work and have a successful CSO in these areas is to approach the whole problem with an open mind. We have to gather the ideas, and then also we have to look at the communities and provide a very vital interface of communicating these interfaces to the large-scale interventions that are happening at the governmental level, because the government level financial heft can never be achieved by any individual CSOs. And then simultaneously, the understanding of the community and understanding of an individual farmer cannot be really taken up all the way to, let us say, secretary of a department or a engineering chief of a department. So this is the area where we have to work. Water efficiency and water use efficiency is a very wide topic, and it requires a large-scale interventions as well as also at the on-farm and at the household level interventions. So all these areas are required to be really looked at, and while looking at these areas, to my mind, the overall picture should not be lost sight of. I may succeed in a community in a particular way, but then that cannot be the panacea. We must understand that there are huge variety of agroclimatics in the country, huge variety of social strata and economic strata in the country, and one solution will not necessarily be something which will fit everywhere. But then simultaneously, we should be open, and we should also see that a bouquet of solutions are also produced at the policy making level and at the technological level, so that some choice can always remain, and one size fits all approach is also avoided at the governmental level. That is where I think we have to work together in the civil society organizations, so that we are able to achieve what we have started out with. So at the end, I will thank all my co-panelists who have provided very vital interventions and a very important interventions, and I will hand back to Veena ji for further proceedings.
Thank you so much, our eminent speakers, our co-chair. It was indeed an insightful session on the role of civil society, and thank you for sharing all the practices, and how one can overcome the opportunities and challenges in the water issues in India. So now I request Dr. Veena Kanduri to please come up on the stage to present the mementos to our speakers and our chair. I request Dr. Veena Kanduri to please present a memento to our chair, Mr. A.B. Pandya.
Before we proceed for this ceremony, I would like to extend thanks to all the panelists, chair, and the distinguished participants for making the deliberation successful. And we are taking all these observations into a discussion paper which Nupur and our senior members have suggested. And that will be presented to the first the panelists and later on to the government. So this is the whole idea.
Can we have a huge round of applause, please? I request Dr. Veena to please present the memento to our panelist, Mr. V.K. Madhavan. Mr. Suresh Babu. Dr. Nupur Bahadur. Mr. Shwavik Siddiqui. Mr. Raj Pandian R. Dr. Asad Kumar. Now I request our chair, Mr. A.B. Pandya, to please felicitate Dr. Veena Khanduri. Hall number 8. Once again, thank you everyone for being such a patient audience, and we hope to see you tomorrow. The lunch is being served at hall number 8. I request you to please proceed for the lunch. Thank you once again for being a part of International Water Week 2022. We'll be having more technical sessions tomorrow as well, so please do join us at Hall 2C. The lunch is ready and is being served in Hall number 8. I request all the guests, our speakers and panelists to please proceed for the lunch. And thank you once again for being a part of International Water Week.